Watch this. Do you know a Peter Parker who's Spider-Man? Well, I know 3 of them. So with Spider-Man No Way Home now in theaters, I thought, be good to make the obligatory let's rank all the Spider-Man movies video. And if you guys haven't been here before, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that notifications bell so you never miss out on my take on all things movies. But I will warn you, this video will contain spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home when we get to it in this list. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet, just add this video to your watch later or your favorites list and come back and join me for this video once you've seen the movie. Or if you don't care about spoilers, welcome and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, we're gonna go from worst to best, all right? So starting off at the bottom of this list, we have The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I remember being very excited when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was coming out because Electro has always been one of my favorite characters from the video games and the comics, and I like Electro. I just do. And Jamie Foxx is a great actor. He's an Oscar caliber actor. He is so good, and the idea of him playing Electro was very intriguing to me. Unfortunately, the movie's a complete mess, and you can tell, you know, Sony once again trying to shove everything into one movie and not pacing themselves out. You know, the performances are all over the place, the characters are all over the place, the story's all over the place, everything in this movie is all over the place. However, one big credit I'll give this movie is the death of Gwen Stacy. That scene is heartbreaking and it's gut-wrenching because you can hear the snap when he you know, just catches her at the very last second, you know. And Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, I like Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I do. I just don't like the movies he was Spider-Man in. That's the problem. And, you know, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there's really not that much to like about it. Number 8 on the list is the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. Again, not a movie that I like very much at all. I don't know what it is. Like, I just don't find this movie interesting. I don't find it fun. I like Andrew Garfield. Like, he's a fantastic actor. I like the Lizard. I do. I got a kick out of the Lizard. And Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone in both Amazing Spider-Man movies, their chemistry is one of the greatest on-screen romances in comic book movie history. Like, we don't get many of them that are, you know, really fleshed out and really well done. And the chemistry between Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield in these movies is amazing, partly helped by the fact that they were dating in real life, a bit like Tom Holland and Zendaya. You know, that chemistry translates to the screen. Actually, I think Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst also dated shortly after making the Spider-Man trilogy. So every actor who's played Peter Parker so far has dated the MJ or the Gwen in their movies. That's really funny. But those two have such a great on-screen romance in these movies, and it's one of the strongest, it might be the strongest element of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but I don't like them. I've got to be honest. I'd love to sit here and tell you that I love them, but I don't. But I do really love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I think he was terrific. Okay, next up is Spider-Man Homecoming, and I know this is some people's favorite Spider-Man movie. This isn't a movie that I loved when I first saw it. I like this movie. I do. I don't love it. I have some fundamental character issues with this movie. The big one being that I understand what they were going for in trying to have this movie set basically right after Civil War and have Tony Stark and Happy act as mentors to Spider-Man. And I love that idea. I just don't think it came across right. It felt like rather than being mentors and helping to guide Peter, Happy and Tony were it felt like they were almost bullying him in a sense and being overly mean to Peter. And, you know, you could call it tough love if you want to, but to me, it didn't come across that way. And it really did rub me the wrong way. It really did. I didn't like the dynamic between Peter and Tony Stark in this movie, and especially Peter and Happy in this movie. I just didn't think it worked well. Happy Hogan comes off looking like an absolute asshole to Peter Parker in this film. And so while I like the movie, it's not one of my favorite Spider-Man films. I just have too many fundamental story and character issues with the film for it to be higher on the list, but I don't have time to go into all of them now, obviously. Okay, this is going to be a very unpopular opinion. Next up, I have Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Listen, I know Spider-Man 3 is not a perfect movie. I acknowledge that it's got some issues. Sam Raimi and Sony were sort of on different pages. Sony wanted, Venom in the movie. Sam Raimi didn't initially plan to have Venom in the movie. and Sony wanted a bunch of other things. I don't know the full story. I just know that they basically forced Sam to put in things in this movie that he didn't want and didn't plan for, and he just had to sort of deal with it. I don't think this movie is as bad as other people think it is. And it might have something to do with nostalgia, because listen, I grew up with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Those movies were my first introduction to superhero films. And so Spider-Man, all three of those films hold a very special place in my heart. So I acknowledge I may have the nostalgia goggles on for Spider-Man 3, but let me tell you, the best thing in one of the best things in Spider-Man 3 is, you came, looks like just in the nick of time, and the music swells. That is one of the most epic moments in all of comic book movie history. And it gave us our first taste of what a superhero team up would look like in a modern superhero movie, modern at the time, superhero movie. It was fantastic, and it gives me chills every single time that scene comes on. Another highlight of this movie is J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. I mean, he's fantastic throughout the whole Sam Raimi trilogy. You tell my wife! Thank you. Continue. Listen, Spider-Man 3 just holds a special place in my heart, all right? Leave me alone. Holds a special place in my heart. It means something to me. Okay, in the 5th place on this list, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. Far From Home was an absolute blast from start to finish. I really, really enjoyed Far From Home more than Homecoming. I feel like in this movie, you know how I said in Homecoming, I felt like Happy was kind of almost bullying Peter Parker in a sense. And in Far From Home, the mentor aspect of their relationship between Happy and Peter really improved in this film, like tremendously. And, the scene on the plane in the 3rd act where Happy's talking about Tony wouldn't have done what he did if he didn't know you were going to be here after him. And then Peter's making his new suit on the jet, and Happy's just looking at him so proud, like a loving parent watching their child go off to school for the first time. Far From Home has some of the greatest moments in Spider-Man movie history. Like, the scene where the whole Mysterio dream sequence, the scene where Peter Parker finally, like, his spider sense, comes out in full force, and he's using it to destroy all the drones. And then the cliffhanger at the end. They chose to have the identity reveal be like the mid-credits scene. And I remember at the time, seeing people, the uninitiated movie fans, leaving before that scene happened. And I always wondered at the time, like, if you leave and you don't know that mid-credit scene is there and you never see it, then the movie ends on a happy note. If you don't see that scene, the movie ends on a happy note. But if you stick around, you saw that scene, the movie ends on a completely depressing and intense note, because his identity's just been revealed and his life's been messed up. And I wasn't sure whether they were going to pick right up with that with Spider-Man No Way Home, or if it's just going to be like brushed over, like, oh yeah, Nick Fury set the world straight, it's all good. I didn't know. But, if you've seen No Way Home, you know how they continued that. Okay, next up is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This was a film that I didn't like the trailers. I didn't like the idea for the movie. I thought it was a stupid idea for a movie. And I'm like, really? You're going to do it animated? You're going to do it about Miles Morales? Like, I don't know. I wasn't digging the idea behind the movie. And then the movie came out and I fell in love with it. Like, it is a fantastic movie. It really is. It is charming and heartfelt and just completely bonkers. Like, come on, Peter Porker, the amazing Spider-Ham, Nicolas Cage voicing Spider-Man Noir, Haley Steinfeld as Spider-Gwen, my future wife, Haley Steinfeld, Spider-Gwen, and then, of course, you got Miles, you got Kingpin, and then, Aaron Davis's Prowler, voiced by the great soon-to-be Blade, Mahershala Ali. Into the Spider-Verse was so much fun. I love Into the Spider-Verse. And I think, Into the Spider-Verse, had it not come out and had it not been a big success, I don't know that Sony and Marvel have the balls to do what they did with Spider-Man No Way Home. I really don't. Okay, 3rd on the list is the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. I love this movie more than most people do. At least, a lot of people I hear talk about it, they don't talk about this movie very, a lot of the praise goes to Spider-Man 2. and well deserved. The third act fight between Spider-Man and Goblin, Godspeed Spider-Man. It's brutal and it's visceral and it's emotional. And I'm pretty sure this might be the first comic book movie I ever saw. So, like I said, like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is it's very important and influential to me. And this one in particular. And plus, it's just fun to meme on it. It really is. The whole Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is just memes upon memes upon memes. I'm something of a scientist myself. And that leads us into Spider-Man 2. The introduction of Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. We have more Norman Osborn talking to himself in a mirror. We have this movie is a masterpiece, and it's a masterclass in how to make a superhero movie and how to do it well. And Alfred Molina might be one of the, if not the greatest casting for a comic book movie villain in comic book movie history. Like, he's so good as Doc Ock. He's so good. The power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Speaking of power and great responsibility, my favorite Spider-Man movie, you know what it is. You knew this was coming if you've seen my review, and I'll leave a link to it around here somewhere. It's Spider-Man No Way Home. Listen, and spoilers, by the way. This movie to me, and they were saying it on the press tour, this is the culmination of 3 generations of Spider-Man movies. And having this movie, having the villains come back, having Tobey and Andrew back in the movie, this was such a emotional roller coaster. It was a cinematic event that we haven't seen in a couple of years, not since Avengers Endgame. I actually think this movie held more hype and excitement around it than Avengers Endgame did because, it's been, this is a culmination of a build-up that's been going on longer than the MCU. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy started in 2002. And so it's been around longer than the MCU. And so the culmination is bigger, and the importance and the emotional weight and the nostalgia around it. And something I didn't touch on in my non-spoilers review, but I thought I'll touch on it here, is that, throughout the home trilogy for the Tom Holland Spider-Man, he learns lessons and it's really, the whole trilogy is really his Spider-Man's origin story. And by the time you get to the end of No Way Home, he is Spider-Man. His origin story is now complete, and now we are starting fresh with him as his true Spider-Man. He's learnt the lessons. He's had the trials and tribulations. Now he can be Spider-Man. And with his Spider-Man in particular, I felt like throughout his movies and throughout his journey in the MCU, I've sort of been feeling like, the only way for him to really get out of the shadow of, say, Tony Stark and the Avengers, especially when you get to Far From Home, I started to feel like the only way for him to learn the lessons he's going to need to learn to become who he needs to be is to learn those lessons from people from other Spider-Men who have been Spider-Man for longer. Tobey and Andrew being in this movie wasn't just a gimmick. It wasn't just there for cheap pop. It was very important to the narrative and to Tom Holland's character as Spider-Man, because only those two could teach him the lessons that he needed to learn in the journey of not just this movie, but his whole trilogy. And look, all around, this movie is just... I don't know that I could say definitively right now that it's, my favorite comic book movie of all time, but it's certainly up there. I'm talking top 5. That's how good I think Spider-Man No Way Home is. I've now seen it twice, and watching it the second time really just solidified to me how much I love this movie. It's definitely my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. I will see, over the next couple of months where it sits as far as greatest comic book movie of all time. To me, that's still probably the first Avengers movie, but No Way Home is right up there. So anyway, guys, that is my ranking of all the Spider-Man movies that have come out from 2002 right up until No Way Home. Make sure you jump down in the comment section below and let me know how you would rank the Spider-Man movies. My name is Tom, and I will see you guys next time.